Hello, everybody. This is Phil Grove, and welcome to a special coaching call where I have a very special guest that is joining us on this call. And our special call for today is Bob Diamond. Bob Diamond is a nationally recognized real estate investor and real estate attorney. He's a regular guest on Fox, NBC, CNBC, and he has his own real estate radio show, and he's actually been on the Learning Channel's Flip That House program a number of times as well. And he's also the author of 3 popular books on foreclosure investing. So, Bob, are you there?
I'm here, Phil. Good to be here today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bob. I'm thrilled to have you on the call, and I appreciate you taking the time to spend a little time with me and my students. Today we're going to talk about non-traditional investing strategies. And Bob, as you know, I recently introduced a program that's really all about owner financing and some kind of non-traditional real estate strategies that probably didn't even make sense 5 years ago, but make all sorts of sense today, because in the post-bubble real estate market, one of the challenges that we all face is the lending environment. 5 years ago, anybody that could fog a mirror could get a loan, and today things have changed dramatically. So I've introduced a number of new strategies for solving the lending problem and providing owner financing solutions in today's market. And I have to say, Bob, it's really stirred things up a lot. People haven't used these strategies in many cases for a number of years, and when I introduced, or I might even say reintroduced, some of these strategies into the market, a lot of people have said, oh my gosh, is that legal? Can you do that? Does that make sense? What's this all about? I have never heard of this before. It's just stirred things up a lot. Any thoughts on all that?
Well, when people hear things that they're not, intimately familiar with, sometimes they do, get a little thrown sideways, and that's okay. Good education can clarify all that and clear up for everybody. And I want to let everyone on the call know that I've gone through your entire program from stem to stern, from beginning to end, and I loved it. I thought that it was giving out information that's timely, that's critical for every investor to know right now. And I thought, just on the personal note, Phil, I thought it was really well done. I mean, you gave me insights that I hadn't thought of, and you also gave me the things that I'd forgotten. And it's obvious from reading the materials that you're out there in the field every day doing deals, because it's full of practical advice that really will work today. And just to give everyone just a flavor for what my background is, I've been investing for over 20 years, and I've been a real estate attorney for 18 years, since 1993. So I've been around the block, but I have to say, Phil, that your materials were great, not only because they were accessible, I mean, not just to someone with a legal background, but really to anybody who has an interest in the area and has common sense. I thought the materials were extremely accessible, extremely well done, very thorough, very complete, and chock full of information that investors just have to have today. It's just everybody should have it. Even if you didn't want to use that particular strategy, the information in there is invaluable, because the tips and tricks and techniques are just something that they take years to learn, but someone would be on such a leg up if they learn just a few of them, just 10% of what's in your materials. An investor would be years ahead. So,
well, Bob, you have me blushing here, and I do want to. So thank you very much for the kind words. And by the way, we're not selling anything today. And Bob just volunteered to be on the call. He just wanted to kind of talk about this topic. So, but thank you very much for those kind words.
Yeah, and it's not just for business. There's no sale today. I mean, these are all people that know you and have your stuff, and I think that it's just great. It's just great materials, and I recommended it to my students because I thought it was great, and I still do.
Well, I have to say that when I introduced this new program and these new strategies, a lot of investors that have been investing a long time, like you, and even investors that were investing way back in 1980, in 1980, we had another period of time where lending was virtually not available. I mean, you could get loans, but interest rates went all the way up to 18%. and for all practical purposes, lending was not available. So they kind of almost went into a barter system and an owner finance system, and the rules changed dramatically. And the guys that were back in the 80s investing and look at my new program, the light bulb goes on and say, yeah, that makes total sense. It's just like it was back in 80. Even the guys that were investing before, subprime lending was available back before 2001 or whatever, are very familiar with these strategies. But there's a whole crop of new investors that just have never heard of all of this stuff. And, they're just like, oh my gosh, that's so different than anything I've heard of before. And frankly, I'm kind of flattered because, I feel like the entire industry is crediting me with inventing everything that I'm talking about. But, it's not all true. I mean, we're doing some novel things. We've updated these strategies for today's market, for today's time. But these are strategies that seasoned investors like yourself have been using for a long time. Any thoughts on that?
You're exactly correct, and that's good news, especially from the lawyer's perspective. These are not brand new things that haven't been dealt with in the law, haven't been done before. It's things that have been around for a long time, but as you said, they get updated for today. But I also think they're going to grow more and more popular because right now lending is not very available, and I don't know that it's going to become available. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see it shoot up to very high rates, just to attract people to put up mortgage money. And then these things that you're teaching are going to become even more popular. And things do come around in cycles. And the stuff you're teaching is well established in the law. It's good material. And if you know how to use it right, you can just do deal after deal. And I think getting over what the primary problem is today, I believe that deals are available, everywhere, but that the financing is so often not available. That people don't have high enough credit scores. They don't have enough liquidity. They don't have enough net worth. And the FDIC has recently added, I don't know if you've heard about this, Phil, but they've recently added for large commercial deals, they've added liquidity requirements and net worth requirements that for liquidity it wasn't even there before. That's brand new. And the net worth requirements went way up.
Right.
So, even people that have experience and great track records with commercial, they have found that as of January they couldn't get a loan.
Yeah, it's gotten pretty crazy, and hopefully the lending situation will soften over time. But clearly, we're in a very lending unfriendly environment now. That's likely to happen for a long time. And the kind of lending that was available 5 years ago, I don't know if we're going to see that sort of lending available for another. I mean, we're talking decades. I mean, you're not going to see the banks go back to providing what I would call subprime lending maybe in our lifetimes. I mean, certainly until everybody has long since forgotten about the whole bubble we just went through. And
you know that.
Yeah. So talking about some of the different strategies, I just want to get this one right on the book. One of the strategies that I teach are buying properties subject to and variations of that, such as wraparound mortgages and trusts and what I call mortgage assignment, simply buying properties subject to and then letting somebody else purchase the property subject to the existing financing. So just to get that one right onto the table and off, is it legal to buy properties subject to?
Yes, and of course that has some little variations in different states, but yes, as a blanket statement, there is a way to do that in really every state, and there's a way to do it using the tools that you teach, and in your program, there's a way to do it. And I think one of the things people from the outside may not realize is that your program has a variety of different techniques to solve a variety of different problems, and I see that sort of as bringing the right tool to do the right job. Like if you had a screwdriver and a hammer, you're better off. You can do more work. So if you needed to fix a light switch, then the screwdriver would come in handy. Hammer, not so much. But if you needed to reattach a piece of drywall, the hammer would be what you would need. Right. And one of the things I love about the program is it really gives a number of options and a number of ways to deal with each individual situation. Because let's face it, one of the creative parts about investing is that each situation is somewhat unique. Each house is a little different, the finance is a little different, and the seller's needs, wants, and desires are different.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I call myself strategically agnostic. You know, I do marketing. I teach my students how to do marketing, and we find buyers and sellers, and they all have their own unique problems. I just want to have tools at my disposal to solve whatever problems come across my desk. It takes a lot of time and effort and money to do your marketing, to get that deal flow established. When that phone rings and somebody's calling you and they want to sell a house, you know, you have to remember it might have cost you $100 or $200 to get that phone call to ring, to get that conversation going. So you want to be able to monetize, to make money solving that problem, regardless of what the solution is. And that's why I like to provide a lot of different tools for my students to be able to solve the problems. You can do assignments, you can do RAFs, you can do lease options, you can do contract for deed, you can do whatever is the best solution for that particular seller's problem.
Yes, and that's important. It's important not to go out as a one-trick pony, because your trick only entertains so many people. And you can
well, and I think a lot of people do. I mean, they get comfortable with a particular strategy, and I would argue that sometimes they even get comfortable with a strategy that might not work anymore. I see a lot of people that were doing things before the market changed, before the bubble burst, and they keep doing those things. And, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. You know, the market changed. Things that made sense 5 years ago don't make sense anymore. Things that make sense today, like mortgage assignment and owner financing. I don't think it would have even made sense to do this 5 years ago. 5 years ago, anybody could get a loan. You know, so there was no need for it. So, you know, but today, you know, when it's very difficult to get a loan, you know, all of a sudden there's a market, and then there's many strategies that 5 years ago made all sorts of sense, and today they just don't work anymore. And that's kind of why I developed these strategies for the market that we're in today.
And that that makes perfect sense to do that. And it makes perfect sense for everybody to realize that real estate investing evolves and adapts and adjusts, and we as investors have to do that in order to be successful given different climates. It's like when it's winter out, you have to wear your winter clothes. When it's summer out, you wear your summer clothes. You can be comfortable in either type of condition, but not if you're wearing the wrong clothes for the season. And you know, we're in a different season now than we were 5 years ago. That's for sure.
Well, Bob, you and I have talked offline about some of the strategies such as buying property subject to, and one of the things we both recognize is sometimes people either don't understand it. We already talked about the legality of it. They don't think it's legal until somebody tells them, like an attorney tells them that it's legal. But they also, some people don't feel comfortable with those strategies. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Sure, and I understand. I think the one strategy that most people, if they're going to be uncomfortable, the one they're going to be uncomfortable with is a straight-out subject to, where they're taking the deed and they're leaving an existing mortgage in place and making payments on it. And they get concerned that the bank is going to call the loan. They get concerned that somehow that's illegal. And I understand that and appreciate it.
Or that the buyer won't continue to make the payments.
Yeah, it could be the buyer won't continue to make the payments. They may be in Texas where you're really limited. You really can't use that particular strategy. But if for any reason someone feels uncomfortable, there are other ways. And one of my favorite ways, and I think one that everyone understands and doesn't make anybody uncomfortable, is doing an option and a lease on the property. So you'll be step one, we're going to be doing a lease on the property, which I think everybody could agree you can lease out property. That doesn't cause any, it's not illegal anywhere in the whole United States to lease a property. I don't think anybody would even consider challenging that. So let's look at the option, which is what's left. The option is the other part of the agreement where you're getting the option to purchase the property from the seller at a fixed price for a fixed time period. So it might be that you can buy the property for $100,000 anytime over the next 5 years. And that gives you the choice to buy it, and that's also one that's not going to bother anybody. You're not going to see, banks don't call loans because you granted an option on the property. I've never heard of such a thing.
Well, it's interesting. I think you said something that was overlapping earlier. I like the lease option as well. It's another option that I provide in my program because I want people to just have different tools to solve different problems. I will say that lease options actually are the one strategy that's actually not legal in Texas, although the subject to strategy is legal in Texas.
Well, being a lawyer, I just have to do just one little bit of quibbling. You're correct. You can do the subject to, but That just depends if there's existing financing on it, just to be clear for everybody.
Yeah, and in Texas, you can do it. But what I was going to say on the lease option, what I always do when I talk to my students about lease options versus subject to is I talked about the trade-offs. I mean, there's pros and cons to either scenario. I think the lease option, for example, provides some additional protections for the seller. The seller doesn't have to foreclose on the buyer if the buyer stops making the payments, and some sellers feel more comfortable about that. Now, I also think that the subject to has some benefits maybe to the buyer because the buyer gets immediate ownership. They get to start writing off the tax for the interest payments. They get the other benefits that go along with ownership, but it's a little less desirable for the seller. Now, the seller also, some sellers, they just want to transfer ownership and they just don't want to think about it anymore. They don't want to collect the lease or have as much direct involvement, whereas other sellers are more interested in that higher level of protection and they're more comfortable staying involved for a longer period of time. So I think the key is, in my opinion, I'll have you chime in on this as well, you need to do your marketing, get people that are motivated sellers to call you, and then talk about what their situations and concerns are, and then map their situation into the appropriate strategy so that you can both solve their problem and make money along the way.
I think that's important, and one of the things that I've experienced as an investor, certainly, is that the first thing you want to do with your seller is listen to them. You don't want to come in belching out orders as to what you're going to do and how you're going to solve the problem, because you need to match the seller with where they are and what they're really looking to do. Like you said, Phil, for example, a seller says, well, I'm getting shipped out, I'm going overseas, I don't want to have to worry about this house, I want to be completely out of it, then that's a strategy where maybe they will be transferring the deed. It makes much more sense for them, and they're more comfortable with that.
Right.
And you may have another seller that says, I'm very worried that if this person doesn't pay, I'm still going to be liable on this mortgage. And then I think a lease and an option is probably a better route, because you can say to them, look, if you're not paid, you can go to landlord-tenant court and file an eviction. It's quick, it's easy, you don't need a lawyer, and everybody knows that's sort of a quick, that's not like going to real court. That's just a little baby court that you can do by yourself.
Right.
And I think it's so important when you're negotiating to meet people where they are. And, this is an agreement that we want to reach with them. As long as the economics are good, we want to reach it with them, and we need to meet them where they are. I love, Phil, that you give, I think one of the things about your course that I really liked was it did give a different options on ways to handle things, point out the pluses and minuses of each, and I think that really equips the investor to go in and talk to a homeowner and really meet them where they are and come up with a solution for them. It's like going to someone's house with a full tool belt. You can solve a lot of problems with a full tool belt. If you only go with a screwdriver, then it better be a screw that you're working with, otherwise you're done.
There you go. Well, and I consider myself strategically agnostic, so that's kind of my philosophy. But I wanted to kind of ask just some general kind of tapping into your, extensive investing experience and your legal background as well. What is your advice for investors today to do these kinds of strategies in a safe, ethical, and legal way? Just general advice.
Well, I would say generally they should study the materials first. Go through them, just learn them. And I would also say that you want to have a relationship with a local real estate attorney that you can just at a high level run things by. And a really great place to find that sort of person is at your local RIA club. Almost every RIA club that I've ever seen has one or two attorneys sort of hanging around who use that as a way to get clients. They're specialized into servicing investors. They know the issues. They know what you can do and what you can't do. And they're investor friendly. Usually they're priced reasonably, and you don't have to spend lots of time with them. You can be at a very high level. You can talk to them, and it's good to have a relationship where you can pick up the phone or send an email and say, here's what I'm doing. What do you think? You're not going to get used bills from that, but you're going to be safe. And so I think that's sort of one component. Have that relationship with someone who knows. Not someone who's half knowing, but someone who knows. And I think that's number one. And secondly, understand that most things you can do. Most things you're perfectly free to do. We have a few things, and you have some state variations, and you have some state laws that change from time to time, so we need to keep up. But most things you're going to be fine with. And whether you're going to have any issues or not depends a lot more on whether you communicate with the seller, you communicate with your buyer, and you keep everybody informed. That's really where you're going to get into headaches or not headaches.
Disclosure.
Well, it's disclosure and also communication. To be fair, I mean, I thought your disclosures were great in the course, but also just that, that good business where you're communicating. So like if I'm doing business with you, Phil, I'm saying, hey, the payment went out yesterday. I'm sending you maybe an email, or letting you know just what's going on.
Right.
Someone's moving into the house. But whatever it is that's happening, communicating.
Yeah, it's surprises that get people upset. Things that are unexpected. Even bad news, is okay if it's expected. It's when it's unexpected that things get really messy. Exactly. So I agree. And just kind of tapping off or commenting off a comment you made before about local attorneys, we're actually creating a database of attorneys all over North America that are what I call investor-friendly and savvy attorneys that can do these types of transactions, because not all real estate attorneys are what I would describe as real estate investor attorneys or creative real estate attorneys. A lot of even real estate attorneys, when you talk to them about strategies like wraparound mortgages or subject to, frankly, I've found that a lot of real estate attorneys kind of say, huh, what? And unfortunately, my personal experience is, what's that?
You need a guy who's old enough.
Yeah, well, old enough, experienced enough, whatever. I mean, I Bob, and not to bash attorneys, I love attorneys, and you're a friend of mine, and my dad's an attorney, but a lot of times, when an attorney hasn't heard about something, their knee-jerk reaction is, oh, you can't do that. And it's very frustrating to me. What is your thought on that?
I agree, and sometimes you have to shop around a little bit. I found that most of the RIA type attorneys are investor-friendly. That's a way to find them.
I agree.
But, yeah, it's... You know what they say, Phil? You know what the best birth control is for an attorney?
Go ahead.
His personality.
There you go. We're not going to get into the lawyer jokes, are we?
No. It's just, sometimes the attorneys, if you get a bad one, they don't really appreciate the business side of things, where, it's not okay to just say no to everything. And sometimes the question you have to ask the attorney is, how can I do this?
Yeah, and frankly, I agree. The right question is not, can I do it, but how do I do this? And unfortunately, though, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I had a neighbor who wanted to sell his home with owner financing, and he had a home that was a couple $1 million home, and there's no such thing as a $2 million stated income loan. I mean, there's just literally no such thing. And we found a buyer, and the buyer wanted to buy it, and the seller wanted to sell it, and the seller was willing to wrap his loan, sell it subject to with a wraparound mortgage. And the buyer's attorney, who was a real estate attorney, the buyer called his attorney and said, can you do this? And the buyer's attorney told the buyer, no, that's not legal. And it was absolutely not true. But it freaked the buyer out. Because if a buyer asks his attorney, is this legal, and the attorney says it's not legal, the deal is dead. I mean, there's
You're pretty much done at that point. Yeah, and that's really unfortunate. And attorneys do those things occasionally, but not to get too far off the mark here. Most of the time, things go fine for everybody. I mean, just to we can get wrapped around the axle on things that might happen. And for everyone out there, I just want to encourage you, and I always do this with my students. Just understand that most things work, but you have to go do it. That's all. And you don't want to get hung up on, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? If something happens, then maybe that deal will die. That's okay. There'll be another deal next week. Or maybe you'll just have to work a little harder to get that one through.
Well, I mean, go ahead, Bob.
You've been around a long time, Phil, and you know that every deal has a challenge, don't you think? At least in my experience, every deal is something that tries to kill it. Something that tries to be that little stick in the spokes of the wheel. And if we keep working at it, we usually get through it.
Yeah, and commenting more on the kind of the attorney issue, I've actually found that it's kind of hard to do something, not that I ever try, but I mean, when you're closing your deals with attorneys and title companies, they're not going to let you do something that's not legal there. For example, like we talked about lease options in Texas, you functionally can't do that. You generally are going to have a difficult time closing, or maybe contracts for deed is another thing in Texas you can't do. If you go to an attorney and say you want to close a deal with a contract for deed, the attorney's immediately going to say you can't do that. So it's more likely they're going to tell you can't do something you really can do than that they would ever let you actually do something that you can't do.
I agree with you, because they don't want to be involved with it. And so there are a lot of natural protections built in. And I don't want to overly complicate this, because I don't want to make sure we're not going down that path, because for everyone here, the program you have is great, and the worst thing you could do is not use it. That would be the most economically harmful thing you can do. And one of the great things just has so many different choices. And I personally think that in most places, the one that's least offensive, and this isn't everywhere, but in most places, the one that's least offensive and is unlikely to give any headaches is a lease with an option to purchase.
Right.
And it's two separate documents. In most places that you're not going to get any resistance from anybody. Everybody understands leases, and no controversy there. And an option to purchase, they've been around forever. And
sure.
Not controversial. And, you can, one of the things I did love, Phil, is you do have different choices, and I love the way that you lay out the pluses and minuses of each.
Sure.
So that people have tools to go to and work with various sellers and get to what really the point of all of this is to go do some deals. Do some deals and get your way closer to your dream, whatever it is, whether it's just to pay off your credit card debt or to have an ongoing business that can get you out of the work that you're doing today. And I did also think, Phil, that the level that your course materials are written on, I think, is really good. It's very accessible. You don't need a law degree to figure it out. You don't need a big background in real estate. I thought it was just chock full of really well-presented, accessible, digestible material, which is great.
Well, I thank you very much for that, Bob. And Bob, let me let you round us down by saying, you've got a lot of experience. You've been in the market for a long time. You've watched the market evolve over the last few years. Kind of what advice would you give my students in general on kind of what opportunities exist in the marketplace and what should they be doing right now?
The opportunities are greater than I've ever seen. The only thing I saw that was even close to it, Phil, was when I started in real estate, which was in 1988. I started looking at real estate. 89, I bought my first place. And then we had the savings and loan crisis and the RTC taking over properties and selling them cheaply. So that went on until around 1993. And there were great buying opportunities then, just like there are today, except today there are more of them and there are better yields out there. And you can buy properties in neighborhoods that are fantastic, that are much better grade of neighborhood than you would have been able to buy any time in my lifetime. The pricing is lower than it's ever been. I also think, interestingly enough, I don't know what your opinion is on this, Phil, but I think that in most areas of the country, we're either at the bottom or very close to it. Maybe a little bit up or a little down from here.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Bottom. And, the idea is not to buy at the very, very, very bottom, because you won't know that until it's past. But the idea is to buy through the bottom.
Right.
And then as values come up, then you're going to be poised for just great monies for things that you keep as well as for things that you're reselling. We're not likely to see any big crashes from here. We're likely to see bobbling along, and then you see increases.
Yeah, I track Case-Shiller data very carefully, and if you look at the tracking of pricing, by location, most people would agree. If you look at the charts, the market kind of crashed and bottomed out about the third quarter of 2009. It hasn't gone up, it hasn't gone down. Every market's a little bit different, but it's just kind of bouncing along, and at some point it's going to start to appreciate. I don't know if that's going to be in a year or 3 years or whatever, and like you said, you never know until you're looking backwards. But what's really interesting to me is, teaching people how to be investors is a new thing for me. And because I'm a real estate investor, that's what I've been doing all along. If you do it enough, though, you get asked to teach other people. But when I look back over the last several years from the kind of the education market, the people that are getting into the market, here's what I saw, and I want to get your perspective on this. Back in 2002 to 2007, the markets were just blowing up because of the real estate bubble and subprime lending and free money and everything else. And by 2007, everybody and their brother wanted to become a real estate investor because everybody knew people that had made a killing in real estate. And by 2007, that was like everybody wanted to become a real estate investor. And arguably, that was the worst time in history to get into the market. because that was at the top of the market. From 2007 to 2009, 2010, when you had the big correction, you know, it scared a lot of people. And by 2010, 2011, you know, nobody wants to become a real estate investor because they look back over the last few years and they see everybody lost money in real estate. And yet I would argue that it's 2002 all over again. In other words, this is the best time in history to get into this market. So, you know, when the market zigs, you need to zag. When the market zags, you need to zig. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think the herd is almost always wrong. That's
Yeah.
number one. That's just, you know, classic rule of investing. I forget who it was, whether it was Buffett or whoever said it. Some famous investor said, you know, when there's blood in the streets is when you should be buying, and when everybody's greedy, you should be scared, and when everybody's scared, you should be greedy. Meaning that when everybody's buying, you don't want to be in there because they're going to push the price up too high. And my observation would be that the properties that we're buying right now have two exit strategies. And one exit strategy is your main strategy. You know, buy it and resell it if you're using your program to buy it,
right.
Get it to another person, take a fee in between.
Right.
But we also do a second strategy where we're always buying properties that we could rent out and have positive cash flow.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, you should also be buying and holding. You know, you generate income and you generate wealth. So some are for your long term and some are for your short term, and you got to do both.
But we never get in a situation. I know your program wouldn't lend itself to this, but just sort of an aside for everybody out there, we never get in a situation where the building can't support itself with rent. So if Plan A doesn't work out, we always have a Plan B that's safe. And it doesn't mean it's the cash cow of all time, but it does mean that the thing paddles along and keeps itself afloat until times get better, because time cures almost all problems with real estate if you just wait long enough. And the challenge is surviving from here to wherever you need to be. And if the building's paying for itself, you get paid to wait. What could be better than that? And that's the kind of business risk you want.
I've heard people say that wealthy people really don't want to own real estate. They just want to hold on to it from one cycle to the next. And that's kind of consistent with that strategy. So time cures all wounds in the real estate market. Well, Bob, I really appreciate you coming on our little call here. And thank you for volunteering to do this. I've really enjoyed it. Do you have any kind of closing words for our students out there?
Go out there and conquer. You know, it's the time to do it. And you're the smart ones. You're smart to be in this now when the buying opportunity is better than it's ever been. I mean, the things, you know that it makes sense. That's why you're here. And you know that the bargains are out there, which is why you're here. And you know, I love that you're with a teacher who's going to show you how to solve the primary riddle of right now, which is, you know, how do you get the financing to get control over these assets so that you can make money with them? And Phil's program is great for that. It solves that primary problem, which means that you're going to be the one that gets the assets that appreciate, that gets the assets that throw off cash flow on a monthly basis or on a one-time basis for you, depending on how you manage that particular deal. And now is the time to strike. And you know that, and that's why you're here. So congratulations. You're one of the smart ones.
Yes, congratulations, everybody. And thank you so much again, Bob, and thank you, everybody, for being on our special edition coaching call. And we'll see y'all the next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.